Nothing that exciting there anyway.
I was in soy squad.
Ready to go?
Yeah, we're good. It's still advanced for me.
There's no clicker there then?
I don't think so.
Do you need them dimmed or that's what I was trying to find yet?
Who needs a nap? We can turn the lights on.
We'll do a quick introduction here. So first of all, thank you everybody for taking time out of your schedule to come. Sure appreciate it. This is the first time we've ever done anything like this. So it's just got kind of neat to see the great involvement and participation. Current members, would you please raise your hand? So those of you that aren't members, please participate, be involved. We appreciate you guys coming. I did warn a few of you, this is kind of going to be our recruiting mission for the year. This is the Farmer Trial Network. The founders on the other side of the room, these are the companies that we work with. And we brought them together tonight. They're going to do their training. We're going to talk about data tonight. Because one of the biggest things we learned this past year is data collection amongst the organization needs some drastic improvement. And Margaret is shaking her head yes. So, we have been paying attention. I reached out to Alex Schaefer from Iowa Soybean Association. I worked with him for several years. And the quality of data we get from them is just phenomenal. So I want him to kind of help you guys learn and understand what Iowa Soybean Association looks for in data. And in future meetings, if this works, for those of you that didn't know, we do a monthly Zoom. We're probably going to be bringing that back, but I'll start picking different companies in that, like Ag Leader, Deere, Precision. If you guys tell me that's what we want, we'll get a speaker from them and to help you learn how to run your monitors and stuff like that. So this is kind of going to be the first in a series, hopefully. But like I said, Alex Schaefer, he'll be talking. The going joke is Alex is going to talk what to do on data. And then infamous Bob Recker here. We've been good friends for a long time. I asked Bob to come and tell what not to do on data.
Oh, I forgot to do
Keywords when you're collecting data, you gotta have a plan ahead of time. So that's why we want to start early. One of the things we're going to try to do this year, those of you that did trials last year, we had checklists after the season got going. We're going to try to have them out before the season starts. So we're learning, grow with us, but I'll let Alex take it away.
Sure.
And thanks for coming up.
Yeah, don't get too excited. Nothing too groundbreaking, but there's no such thing as a free lunch. So we all ate some food. Now you can listen to me. So as Lauren said, my name's Alex Schaefer. I'm a research agronomist with Iowa Soybean Association. Born and raised in Illinois, went to the University of Illinois, and then spent about my first 15 years outside of school working for a seed company, doing small plot research. So I came to Iowa Soybean in the spring of 2022. And, since I've been here, when we think about small plot seed research versus on-farm research with, different farmers, different equipment, different ground, different practices, there's just a lot more to understand and learn. So it's been a great step for me and very exciting, happy to be here. Research agronomy, Northeast and Central Iowa. And then really, lately we've been trying to lean into this farmer to farmer learning and peer group networking. And so when Lauren talked about the opportunity to come talk to a group of farmers about doing this stuff, got to be here. So thank you for coming, and we'll get into it a little bit. So what I'm going to talk about is really, number one, why put the effort into doing on-farm research, because it's not effortless. It takes time and money and energy. How ISA does it, a little bit on trial design, because there's a lot of different farmers and different ways that things are done, and there's some bad ways to do on-farm research that could lead you to jump to the wrong conclusion, and that's what we're trying to avoid. And then I've got a couple examples at the end of good trials that farmers have done either with us or on their own that have led to a meaningful result that they've been able to make a shift in their practices. And I want to call out this picture because we were talking with Dean and at lunch, you know, cover crops. And this is one of our long-term cover crop sites with Mark Mueller near Waverly. And the yellow strips that you see, those were the no cover, and the green is cover. So Mark, he let this stuff grow up until it was about to head out before he killed it. And this is last year's crop. So we all know it was very dry. And we thought, you know, Mark took this picture, I don't know, Labor Day or in August, somewhere in there, and we got excited thinking, well, maybe, you know, maybe these green strips, maybe all that cover, there was more water infiltration and water holding capacity. And we got all excited until the combine came out. And actually what's going on there is the beans and cover seem to be just set back a little bit. And so there was 4 or 5 bushel yield loss in that cover crop, again, where it was in the boot stage before he terminated it. And so what he learned last year, he will terminate, if we don't get more rain, he'll terminate at or slightly before planting this year to avoid this type of thing. Again, we were all excited, thought, oh, these beans, they're green for a reason, but they were just set back a little bit. So that's, you know, a case for doing some trials to see what will happen, really. So, okay, so now the why and how of why to do it and how we do it at Iowa Soybean Association. Okay, so a little bit about the why. So Research Center for Farming Innovation is who I work for within Iowa Soybean. And we're all about furthering the productivity, profitability, and sustainability of Iowa's farmers. And, you know, part of that is examining cropping systems and really looking at practice comparisons, even product equipment, like as simple as you can get to maybe just a seeding rate trial to a full cropping system comparison, like, you know, like relay cropping like Lauren plays with, or we've got another trial that we call an improved cropping system where we're trying to, in replicated strip trials, compare what I call more traditional agronomy versus conservation agronomy. And 4R split applying, cover crops, no-till versus fall anhydrous, conventional till, all that kind of stuff. So that's what we're doing. This is kind of my my plug for the organization, obligatory slide. So go ahead. So, and this is another one of those kind of why we're doing what we're doing. And, you know, the future of farming, a lot of the guys that we work with, like Lauren and others, they're not afraid to experiment. And we found that there's a spot for us as a commodity organization to both use some of the checkoff funding and outside either grants or private funding to further the checkoff dollar and learn something from your guys' investment. So obviously return on investment is important. You know, we like to get all starry-eyed about all the conservation practices and all the great things that you guys are doing, but at the end of the day, the farm's a business that's got to make money. So it's really getting to the bottom of the story on what pays and what doesn't, and moving forward from there. I already mentioned the profitability piece, productivity and sustainability. Another big thing, and so equipment that's available to farmers nowadays is a huge help. Talking again at supper table, talking about how my grandpa used to do things and what's happening now. There's no way that he could learn with what he had, what we can do now with spatial data and you know, all the bells and whistles that are on the pieces of equipment. And of course, Iowa Soybean relies on collaborations with farmers like you and you know, outside partnerships, Ag Ventures Alliance, everybody, the like-minded people in the community coming together to work together and learn something. So why do on-farm research? Bob looked at this slide as we were getting ready, and farming is complex. Well, no kidding, right? Like I said, as I kind of introduced myself, getting to work with all these farmers across Northeast Iowa and understanding all the different pieces of equipment, the ground, the practices, the products, you know, no two of you guys are the same. So that's both a huge challenge for myself because there's a lot to learn, but it's a huge opportunity because there's a lot to learn. I can take something from all of my meetings and field trials and sit downs and hopefully do a good job of transferring that knowledge to other people to improve their operation. On-farm research is a great decision-making tool for a new product or practice. So I don't know, I would expect you guys get a lot of people at the farm gate trying to sell you something or get you on board with a program or whatever it is. And they're trying to make $1 too. So I think, that's one of the biggest reasons to me to do on-farm research is to really sort out what works and what doesn't, but more importantly, what works in your operation and what doesn't. Because if it works for your neighbor, it might not necessarily work for you. Then again, it's another way to back up your theories and others with data. So we all like to go to the coffee shop and talk about stuff and tell our success stories and maybe some failures here and there, but what makes that even better is some good data that you can pull up and say, this is why I think what I do. Cost savings or yield boosters. So we did a big seeding rate study last year, big push on 4 different seeding rates in soybeans, and really what we learned from the year, and we'll continue to do it, try and get some different weather years and some different situations, but we found that beans don't really care. Like they have innate ability to branch and compensate for yield, unlike corn. If its neighbor's missing, it's going to overproduce a little bit to compensate for that. Corn, the picket fence stand is so important in population. It's such a big deal to maximize yield. Whereas beans, we really learned that you could cut down that rate in a lot of different situations and still be okay. And so as investment and inputs comes up and revenue comes down, that's a really important place to start looking to see where on the farm can we save some dollars to, again, promote the sustainability. People talk about sustainability as the farm, and I think about it as whether regulation comes or the banker comes or whatever the case is, this farm is sustainable. I'm going to be able to pass it on to my grandkids and my kids, or it's going to be around it's got staying power. So that, again, another reason to do on-farm research. And again, as I talked about in the beginning, farming is complex and all the different things that are going on out there. If I was able to farm, I'd have a hard time taking somebody else's word for it. I'd really want to test something, and I'll get in a trial design in a replicated strip on my acres with my equipment to make sure that it's going to work. So how we do a trial, and it's a little bit loose, but identifying a variable, and this I've kind of written this to apply to you guys too. If you want to do your own on-farm research or start a small group and bounce ideas around and what might work. So the first thing is identify a variable. Implementing field length strips. I'll get into our trial design here in a couple of slides and why we really promote the replicated strip trials as opposed to like a block design or a simple comparison that way. So when we're building our strips, we're making them at least the width of the combine. Usually it's 2x, honestly. So we got a 40-foot draper, we put in an 80-foot strip, and there's some concessions to make or some things to think about when it comes to, if you got a 40-foot planter and a 30-foot head, a 120-foot strip really makes sense. Again, wider is better to an extent, gives you a lot of flexibility in harvest, but what you want to do or what you don't want to do is make your strip so wide that you're swallowing up an entire environmental attribute and not testing that attribute in both variables. So that's something important to think about. For us to post on our website, and this, so not necessarily my information, but our data and analytics team, they require a 3 replication minimum of the trial. More is better. So we start with 4 at least, usually, if the field's big enough. So then if we get a weather event, combine, whatever, belt goes out, and we lose some data, we've still got 3 good reps. So that's, our statisticians have identified that as being reliable data. Well-calibrated yield monitor, or calibrated yield monitor is very important. Do that every year if you can. And then, so really how we do it is we collect our as applied data, either from the planter, the sprayer, the spreader. We collect some management data and then our yield data. And so in our software, we overlay our as applied or what our treatments are with our yield data. We do some cleaning and some processing. And that's how we make our reports. So the process of cleaning, back up real quick. So we've got a team of data analysts that they'll take the file out of the combine. And so we've got some generic software that we can use. You all could use it too. It's free open source stuff. But you can read those files in and really, look at the Excel table that backs up what that data is and start, so you can look at your moisture, your yield, your combine speed, your swath width, all these things, and you start cleaning the data. So the first thing we do is look for outliers. I think for corn, if it's over 350 bushel or under 50 bushel, something like that, those numbers, those data points get thrown out. If there's a set moisture range, if we're outside of that, that data gets thrown out. Combine speed's a big one. If the combine's not running at full capacity, these sensors don't work quite like they're supposed to. So our data team will look at some of that information and really clean that up so we can get a better picture of what the trial is, as opposed to looking at it just an op center or SMS, which are great tools, but there's some limitations there. So now I'll get into trial design. I talked about it a little bit with the replications, but there's some considerations to make, again, just to ensure that you're getting good information out so you're not led down the wrong path on a management decision that you might make. So to illustrate this point, I'll show this split field example. This is a Scott Nelson slide that I've borrowed from him. Maybe some people in the room have seen it before, but upon first glance, we've got a field that looks relatively uniform by the naked eye, and so this made up trial, but farmer sets up kind of a block design. He emptied the planter with one variety, and then he put in the next variety, and he's going to try and make a comparison. So variety A, 64 bushel of the acre, variety B, 57 bushel. The assumption would be variety A is the choice. Again, when we dig a little bit deeper, and so this is me making a case for replicated strip trials as opposed to like a block design like you see. As we dig a little deeper into our soil types here, you'll see that variety B has got a good amount of this poor productivity soil. Variety A didn't get placed on top of any of that. Click it one more time. So if we look, variety B, it actually out yielded variety A in all soil types, but variety A didn't have that poor producing soil. It wasn't planted into any of that. So that poor soil type really brought the average down of that variety. Whereas if we had replicated strips, every other one, variety A versus variety B, we're going to get a better picture of the environment, the whole field environment, as opposed to west versus east or whatever the case may be. So this is the risk that you run if you set up trials like blocks. And this is why we do field length strips, and again, replicating it. 2 strips, like a with and without, isn't enough, because your without might be here and your with here, it's just best replicated strips. Go ahead. Okay, and so this, I wanted to show this one. This is from 2023. And so we did a big fungicide trial across the state, and they were drone applied. So we had 3 different products and an untreated. Okay. One thing you'll understand very quickly is that 2023 was not even for fungicide soybeans. It's a little dry, so our disease pressure was very low. So what I wanted to show here, this top left, that's our prescription that we sent to the drone operator. And what I want to point out is we've got so our 4 treatments in rep 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you'll notice in that prescription, none of those reps are arranged in the same way. So it's called randomization. You guys probably know that, but it's very important. Randomization and multiple reps per trial. And so what I wanted to really call attention to here is that you'll notice there seems to be some significant difference in plots 5, 8, and 10. And so I attribute this to field variability because there was a disease, first of all, when we were there. And so this field, just so dry and some sand pockets out there that you could really see it as I was scouting this field at R5, some drought stress. And so obviously in the yields, you can tell that put the hit on. But what's important in our conclusions here is that everything fell into the same yield group. So even though we've got these treatments that seem to stand out, because if we had the same orientation of each rep here, it might be that Veltima or untreated, fell on that one spot in every replicate where it just floated to the top. Whereas if you shake that up as much as you can, the better data you're going to have. And probably a little bit better example of this is, so again, used to work for the seed company, did a lot of yield trial plots, and we really had to make sure that those were randomized, because if we had a plot that was a foot taller and it was always next to this other hybrid that's a foot shorter, it's getting out competed, that's going to show up in the data. So it's very important that we randomize those trials, and the same applies here, like a seeding rate trial. If we've got our 80,000 next to 170,000 and there's an influence there that's repeated in every single replicate, that's going to show up in the data, and it's going to lead to a bad conclusion. So that's my case for randomization and multiple reps per trial. Again, just to make sure good data coming out to make good decisions. Go ahead. So now, spatial data management, data is power. I don't know. So you guys generate a lot of data, again, with the equipment we have and the acres that you farm, every second or whatever, your combine's dropping a data point. There's a lot of information there. If we can be well organized to where we can understand what it means at the end of the season and really look at it. So my first recommendation here is, if you're wanting to do on-farm research on your own, is to invest in some software like this. So we use SMS Advanced quite a bit to play with some data. John Deere Ops Center is really good, for the casual researcher, I would say. And then in field, I think, so these bottom two, this is an app called Fulcrum that we use for field scouting. What's nice about that is you can geotag locations, put in information, and have access to that, photos, everything. It's just important when you get to the combine to have some context about the rest of the season, what you saw when you were scouting, essentially. So again, if you want to do on-farm research, it's worth your money, I think, to invest in some of these platforms. And then like Lauren's talking about, get some training, especially SMS Advanced. There's a lot of tools in there, a lot of utility that you can analyze and look at data a lot of different ways with some guardrails. So, you know, it's built with buttons that are applicable to agriculture versus more generic GIS software. I use maps a lot for if I'm scouting, or say I use a planner that doesn't generate an as applied. Well, maybe I'm dropping flags. I'll go out and pick those up with Google Maps and log a point, and then build some polygons off of that to analyze data later. Okay, so into our data management and attribute labeling. So I don't know if anybody recognizes this farm, but this is Wayne Fredericks. Unfortunately passed away on us here this year, but he did a lot of good work, and part of the reason he was able to do such good work is he was so organized with his spatial data. You know, he didn't need me. He shared the data with me to get to contribute to ISA and get a report. But he knew the result of his trial before I ever met with him. And a lot of that is because of the organization of his data. And then again, this is all in SMS where he's doing stuff. So what I want to call out here is the management tree on the left-hand side. You'll notice how he's labeled everything. So obviously in the fall, he went out and his normal practice was to strip till everything. Well, he thought maybe I'll move to no-till on my corn acres. So these 4 passes in red, he just skipped over with the strip till machine. That didn't log any spatial data, but what he did when he pulled the planter out, he just added a qualifier to what his product was, right? So he put in there no-till and reduced N for some other strips. And so all that data is logged in and as applied through his planner. He's got a different product, and things are well labeled. And really all this takes is the foresight to think about what am I going to do in what fields. And I'm not a farmer, so I'm not super familiar with monitors, but I think going in there and pre-populating some of that information to make your job a little bit easier when it's time to plant, if you can just click a button and you've got what you need, it's not going to fall through the cracks then. And you know, later in the season when things slow down, you're not going to be scratching your head and wondering. So again, attribute labeling, just the product as you're planting can be the best place to do that, just depending on what you're doing. Okay, go ahead. So now I'll get into the result of that trial. And yeah, so here's just some management data. He's got a decal variety over here and a Pioneer. And so what he did, strip till versus no-till, but then he split the planter as well. So that's 2 trials, 2 hybrids, 1 variable, strip till, no-till. And we're going to compare the 2 results just because they're in the same field right next to each other. Again, split planter, and there was a meaningful result from this one. So yeah, just management data. This comes off of the Iowa soybean reports that we generate. These figures here are generated from the as applied that you would create through the planner. And then we just overlay yield data with that. So go ahead. So yeah, the result and why this is meaningful. So you'll see the Pioneer number, normal practice strip till. He experimented with no-till. He lost almost 4 bushel by moving to no-till. The DeKalb number, he lost over 10 bushel. So for Wayne, this is a meaningful result. Hey, there's an opportunity here. I can remain competitive in no-till versus strip till, but I think I want to plant Pioneer, because what's going on here is, you know, you'll notice in strip till 239 bushel versus 236 bushel, both great yields, but this hybrid's a little bit more of a racehorse, right? It's been bred for prime conditions, dry, warm soils, and you know, in the strip till pass, dry, warm soils in the spring, maybe conventional till would work pretty good for this hybrid. But this Pioneer number is going to be a little bit more defensive, so it's going to stand up to those adverse conditions, cooler, wetter soils. But again, there's a management change a guy can make. I don't know the money and the seed between the two companies, but for sure you can save yourself a tillage pass and do a little conservation while you're at it if you choose the right product to go with that practice. So yeah, to me that was a great trial. And I talked to Wayne. It was, I don't know, it's been probably a year now, but I told him, you're retired now, but I'll continue to share these results because it's really meaningful work that he's done. And yeah, I think, sharing that message of how you can do some of this stuff on your own and then share it with neighbors and learn from each other. That's time well spent. So that might be the end of what I prepared. Yeah, so I'd be happy to have a conversation or talk about any questions that you might have. Otherwise, Bob will go and we can continue with questions after that. Yes, sir.
So I was introduced to the Dennis Kinsey and Albrecht method of soil balancing.
Okay.
And if you don't know what your soil is to begin with, how do you know how to interpret this stuff accurately?
Yeah, I would say, well, so we use a lot of old soil maps. So in some of this software, we'll pull in Sergo maps and look at that and kind of evaluate our trial. So, and actually part of our reports is the performance in different soil types. So that information's out there.
That's like 20th century.
Yeah, I know.
technology.
Yeah. And things have changed a lot.
Cutting edge.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at doing a Veris run where I'm looking at EC and really getting into the nitty gritty.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, I think that's great. That's probably just further, like that's detail that we can't necessarily get into with our capabilities. But as far as on the farm, why not?
So in doing the trials I have thus far, looking at the corn side, one of my biggest debates has been if we're trying to just get it down to one variable that we're trialing, but we're doing variable rate nitrogen, how, when you've got multiple soil types, what have you seen? Does a guy flat rate it? So that's not a factor? Or do you still run your VRT and hope you can pull that out within the spatial area of the software and pull that variable back out of it? Because that's the normal practice, is to adjust it based on banking potential.
I would be inclined to stick with the variable rate technology, but again, this is where our field link strips come in, and we've got trials big enough that hopefully we're passing through all those management zones with both variables, so then we can break that down and take a good hard look at it.
So with the systems approach to agriculture, where we're doing 6 different variables or 6 different products, and we're stacking this stuff, we might be using 2 fungicides on seed treatment to spread the spectrum of what's affected, and a plant growth regulator and a micronutrient. How are we going to manage that number of variables?
Yeah, that's where it gets a lot harder. We're trying to do these cropping systems trials where I guess what I would say is walk before you run and think about the baby steps in before you started stacking everything together. I think that's, start experimenting there. And when you find the few things that work, that stack, and then start comparing the systems. So you have this base level of knowledge before you get to that more complex situation. But I struggle with the same thing and thinking about like our improved cropping systems and how do we really identify what's the one variable that makes a big difference. But
and it might be a combination of
exactly. I don't think, there's not a silver bullet in farming. It's,
I mean, it gets back to the software and the management of the data, keeping track of all this stuff. doesn't it?
absolutely, yeah, that's, spatial data, and managing that is very important. But to me, it's no more complex to stack in spatial data, multiple things versus, one versus the other.
But to get three trial areas,
Mhm.
three statistical significance,
Mhm.
in a field that has soil type differences or nutrient is.
It is. Yeah. No, I don't have a great answer for you. It's one of the biggest challenges of making these cropping system comparisons.
Are you looking at this over multiple years and multiple locations?
Yeah, so that would be ideal. So a lot of the examples I gave weren't necessarily, but our fungicide project, our seeding rate, like the big programs that we're implementing, yes, absolutely. And it's different whether yours is probably the biggest thing.
So then what are you looking at for like the statistical error? What difference? Where it makes sense to change practices versus not?
That's a good question. I would have to defer to my data people, but when we get into our reports, again, they're the PhD statisticians, and they can separate it out into yield groups for us. That's where all those showed in yield group A. They're not statistically significant. But yeah, smarter people than me tell me the answer to that one. So, Russ, you got anything? Getting sleepy?
Nope.
You're
I'm
gonna stick
just
around
surprised
to the end?
Joe's.
So, Alex,
Listening to
we'll
a
stick around
sleepy
here to
guy.
the end. Don't want to put. Want to make sure. the questions are- Questions at the end, we'll drag back up here, so. But without further ado, I'll make sure Bob gets his 20 minutes of fame.
My two or three slides. All right, so we're gonna change this up a little bit. Shift gears quite a bit. I wasn't sure. This is my first real acquaintance with Ag Ventures. And as I was working on this, and what I understand Ag Ventures to be is what I wrote this for. And I concluded that Ag Ventures and Adventures was a clever name. There was probably alcohol involved when people were. So we'll go real quickly. I'm going to come at this with the idea that in the other room or tomorrow, you're going to hear lots of ideas from lots of people that have processes or tools or little gadgets that might be pretty cool. And Lauren, I hope I'm not misreading this, but so I'm going to try to give you a little bit of instruction or suggestions on how to be a grumpy old critical listener to the pitches so that you decide if it's something you want to trial on your farm and how you would go about it and at what scale. So there's three things to get out of this part of the meeting tonight. Know what your goal is. What is your goal? Including, that's a question you ask the person that is putting something on a platter in front of you to test on your farm. And then number two, the data thing. Data quality. We're gonna talk about that a little bit, not to the extent that Alex did, but in general. And then I need to talk about integrity a little bit and outreach. Outreach is a really big deal, especially when you're dealing with things that are not a small change. So, Alec, thank you. So what's the goal? There's three kinds of changes in my mind. An incremental change. Most of what Alex was describing here was incremental changes. Is a fungicide going to help me with this variety in this soil and all of that? So these are incremental things that you all do very well, and you do them to maximize your operation. Beyond that is what I would call a significant next step. I don't know if I consider strip till versus no till a significant step. That's just a decision. Now, you want to talk about planting green, that's maybe what you would call a significant step. And then the next one is radical change. Whether it's autonomous grazing or autonomous tractors or all kinds of weird things, maybe some of the biochar stuff that's kind of in that area. So it's pretty radical. So the first thing is, I'm thinking about running a trial on my farm. Which of these is it? So if you go to the next level, I'm going to give you just a little bit of background. What I need is a little bit of water. I can talk somebody out of the glass. I think I was sitting over there. Thank you. When I get too lathered up here, I'll just go dry. Think about the grower, you guys, and think about the corporation. I spent a whole bunch of years in a wonderful little corporation, and it took me about 30 years to get into the right job, but I finally did. But as we were looking at things, every day you go out, you're watching your crops, you're thinking about what's going on, and you watch stuff. The John Deere engineering version of that is fixing the problems you have today. Fix the leaks, fix the stuff that don't work and all that. The next step is the new program, if you talk about it in Deere speak, or new equipment, or an adopted practice in your operation. So it's kind of like, it's not a lot of risk. You're just deciding if it works for you or not, or if it's optimal. Then the radical change is stuff that's just off the wall, crazier than hell. You don't know if it's going to work or not. It's just, you know, most folks just turn around and walk away from it. But if you're in this meeting and if you're running with the Ag Ventures guys, you're probably going to run across some of these ideas, right, Lauren? Or maybe a whole bunch, we would hope. And in the Deere world, that was called advanced products. That's where I ended up my career the last few years, and it was a ball. We had autonomous tractors running in the field before the turn of the century. And so there were reasons why they're just now showing up, but that stuff's been around so in the advanced world. So how do you decide which it is and how much money do you want to put on the table for each of these? So if you go to the next level, think about for every 1,000 acres you have, and think about at Deere, the rule was 4% of sales. We got a current Deere guy here. I think that number's still good. They brag or complain about it, depending on whether it's a good year or bad year. 4% of sales, not profit, 4% of sales went to R&D. And that got broken down between the incremental change. How many engineers, how many bodies do you have run around fixing problems? And the bigger part of it was how many people are working on the new thing, the new high horsepower, the new whatever. That's the bulk of it. That's where you need replicated trials. That's where you run lots of field testing equipment. And the radical change is stuff every year, a bunch of executives, haul them out to the boonies someplace, put them in front of stuff. You hope you got their attention for a few hours and then you send them home and you go back at it. For you all, my suggestion, and in meetings like this, I've had pretty good feedback. For every 1,000 acres, every day you're thinking about getting up in the morning and worrying about every acre. If you're thinking about making another change, just do it on 40 acres, 4% of your 1,000. Try planting green on 40 acres if you have 1,000 acres on 4% of your land. If it doesn't work good, if it's a bad idea, you're not, you know, if that's the difference, you know, God help you. But on the radical stuff, that 40 acres is way too much because you expect that a lot of these things are going to fail. You expect that it might be a big deal or it might not. So keep it really small. So as people are talking to you about things that they would offer to you for a test program on your farm, think about which of those categories in it. Is this an increment? Is this a step or is this a big deal? Go ahead. So lessons learned for me, number one, and I do not own any land other than the little 3-acre parcel south of Waterloo that I live on. I do live and die by the good graces of growers that let me come on their ground. So talks cheap. One of my friends, I made that statement through talks cheap, and he says, yeah, that's why there's so much of it. So the first lesson I learned is don't go big until you know it works. And most people aren't used to that. Most growers go to a farm show, go to a meeting, something's a good idea, next big thing. And then they adopt it across their whole line, their whole piece of equipment. If you're in something that is other than an incremental change that everybody else is doing, resist the temptation to go full Monty. It takes time. And that's the hard part, because you're busy, y'all got things to do, but it takes time to do that. That minimizes the lost revenue, lost time, unintended consequences like weed patches and heaven forbid embarrassment down at the elevator and all that sort of thing. So, data quality. And Alex talked about it very well in much more detail and much more professionally than I can. But if there's something I'm really willing to fall on my sword for, it's having a baseline. There are so many pieces of data, so many stories out there where people don't really have a true baseline. But this is normal and this is the change. And then replications are key for continuous improvement, next step things. The replications are so key because the change is small. If it's an advanced concept, don't even think about running a trial on something that's really far out if your expectation is a really small change. So know or verify the performance before you go big. And then the other thing about doing the more advanced stuff is commit to having fun with it. Commit to learning, even if it's a blatant failure, because you'll learn more and be smarter and do better after you've had some failures. And Lord knows, as Lauren knows, I got a whole bunch of those. Not smart yet, but we're working on it. Ultimately, replications are a big deal. Replications of location, of soil, of season, and of weather. So any of you individually can't do that. So that's why you're in networks and communicate and all that sort of stuff. Lessons learned number 2, have the right data to support the goal. So if someone is coming to you, offering you some bug that's just gonna make all the difference in the world or whatever, data is really important. A few years ago, I was making a presentation to a grumpy old factory manager, telling him how great it was, and he pulled out an old wrinkled dollar bill, and he says, Bob, on here it says, "In God we trust." Everybody else brings data. So if somebody's telling you it's a good deal, trust me, ask them for their data. And we'll talk a little bit more about data in a minute. Growers like large scale. Now I'm suggesting that if I'm selling you something, growers tend to like large scale data. They like field scale data. They don't like little bitty plots. That's where the universities kind of turn off a lot of people, but they got good reasons for doing that and all that. Scientists, researchers, Alec is in the category of supporting big growers. He understands that's what he has to do with the kind of things that he's looking at. But if you're looking at something that's a pretty radical change in the ag environment, the researchers tend to want to get down to individual plants, digging up things and all that. And you don't need 40 acres for that. You just need a little parcel of ground that's representative, if you will. So my methodology, I already confessed to not having any equipment or any land. I do have way more equipment than I should have. Because of how my process has developed in the 15 years that I've been at this, it's small, but it's contemporary. And there's a difference there between small and old. Usually old equals small, and small doesn't have to equal old, at least in my case. Managing the plots. If I own the complete plot, if I'm providing the seed, weed control, fertility and all that, then it's always on marginal ground because nobody gives me good ground. Nobody has extra good ground around, and my plots are usually small. And so my approach is, okay, I can learn some stuff on marginal ground. And then if it's a failure, and often it is, it wasn't going to produce anything anyway. So it's kind of a way of whipping out. On the other hand, if it's good ground, if it's really prime agricultural ground, I have a little thing called 1 minute rule. And if I'm going to do a plot, I don't know to what extent this might apply to some of you who do plots for others or whatever. My rule is, Mr. Grower, I won't take more than 1 minute of your planting season or 1 minute of your harvest season for my plot. So if you go to the next slide, and the way I go about that is the grower gives me a piece of ground. So he's planting, all he has to do is pick up the planter, jump over a planter pass or two and keep going. So then I show up with my little equipment and I do my little thing. But he owns the fertility, he owns the ground, he's got the background, he's scouting it, he's watching the weeds. And you know, I'm very much involved, but it's still my little piece of the world in the middle of his piece, which for me is a really effective way to try something that's different enough you wouldn't want to risk a lot of space on it. As an example, so you think 4-row planter, I got a little 4-row planter. It's got hydraulically adjustable roll width. It's got precision electric drives, hydraulic down pressure and all that. We've gotten so weird is that it's had a fish hydrolysate mix in the tank on front, and then we're blowing in biochar, charged biochar into the furrow on the back while we're planting. So, but in a small plot. And didn't turn out well, but it was an interesting experiment. Much of the time here, we're learning about how this stuff works. A key to my system, and Alex nailed it, knowing that your data is good when you harvest it. That's, in a way, that's my hardest part because my older, and I have SMS and all that, but I end up harvesting 1 row at a time. But over the years, I've turned my little 6620 into a really nice plot combine because it's got a tank scale in the tank that I read from the cab, dump into the wagons. The wagons have scales on them. So I do a small scale, high resolution yield checks. Again, that's because so much of the stuff that I'm working on is small scale, wild and crazy ideas. So if you decide to embark on something that's kind of the wild crazy category, don't feel like you gotta load up your 24-row planter with everything. Do a couple rows, spend a little more time at the harvesting it and managing it, and you'll be managing your risk and still learning things. Okay. Planter, I think we talked about that. I'm kind of a wide row guy. That's my current legacy at this point. I think we've won in the interest of time. We had a really nice plot last year. I had 2 really good helpers. We had like 750 box changes of seed in one day. Had 2 really good helpers. I was in the camp pushing buttons all day. It was a hard day. Noisy, dirty, hot back there. It's hard work. I have learned it's really interesting if I'm working with a seed company, they assume equipment and practices are a given. They assume that it's okay to change seed at every end of the field. And what I've learned is with RTK guidance and electric drives, you can make a lot of changes and do things much more efficiently than you might otherwise do. Okay. This is a plot we had at Parkersburg, Iowa last year. And this is an example. This is a 48-row planter that planted this field. The deal with the grower is, and we met him, 5-minute meeting out in the field, stick a tripod roughly there, and all you have to do is when you're out here planting, when you get roughly to the tripod, skip 240 feet, 1 round, and keep planting. And then when we came in and we did this, we had 8 hybrids and 4 different ways of planting corn in a randomized plot up here on the north end. And this is a 1/4 mile long field. And then down here, this was a replicated trial, 6 replications. These were 3 replications up here. Originally, I thought the whole field was going to be this kind of a plot. And then the person I was working with at Cortiva, God bless her, said, well, we like your combine tank, so you don't need 1/4 mile long rows. So, and we think our 20-foot rolls are kind of short. If you can do a 100-foot long roll and catch it with your tank, that's good enough. So suddenly overnight, this field went from having one variable in it, which was roll width, to having a whole bunch of variables in the same amount of space. Now, we burned an enormous amount of time doing it, but so this was pure statistics, this was randomized, and then this in here, we did some weird stuff. Like, well, let's plant protein peas in between the corn rows. And let's do some interesting things. We just did it for the hell. We planted peas going, we didn't know how to harvest them yet. And we did some really super narrow corn rows. This was the sort of thing, this was our little playground in here. The rest of this is what you would do to support, professional big ag, if you will. Okay. You've heard me say I like wide rows. The meter back here is a Montag meter. You think about Montag equipment, God bless them, in Emmitsburg, Iowa. Usually it's on big 60 and 120 foot wide rigs or big tillage rigs. They built a special little meter for me based on their current product that fits inside of a 48-inch roll. And then thanks to help from Lauren, I got some nice dual seat openers. So this little drill will drill a 48-inch wide cover crop plot, so we can put it between corn rows. So now we're looking at an equipment variation that enables a practice that we think is useful. Most companies, whether it's a cover crop company or a corn company, assume this can't be done. They assume nobody's gonna make something like that. And so be aware of where people are coming from in their assumptions, and especially those of you who have really embraced the technology stuff. You have a lot more capability than they think you have. So if you've taken the time to learn it, you may actually do a much better job of being able to deliver it with less effort and better quality. Next. Same thing, Lauren, again, President Lauren taught me a little word, strip spraying. So I took a barrel, and right here, we're just applying a chemical to the rows to manage the weeds there without impacting what we had just drilled in the cover crop region. So again, different equipment set. You could do this on a bigger scale, but in my case, I didn't want to because I didn't have that much space to use. And I didn't want to tie up, that much land and all of that. Okay, next. Side dressing, same thing, got the only little tractor with saddle tanks on it. I don't know. and it's got RTK guidance, and it's got an isobus controller in it, and it's tired. It really, if anybody here has the Vineyard tractor laying around you aren't using, come talk to me. I think I've got more fingers and toes than there are Vineyard tractors in Iowa, but there ought to be one more. So, okay. Same thing, Montag product. Major redesign every year. This started out so that it could work with different equipment, go down the road behind the pickup and all that. And it keeps evolving. So don't be afraid to change. I think I've heard Lauren use the word, don't adopt what I do, adapt what I do. You said that a time or three. So I took a very interesting, very creative product that Montag provided and keep adapting it to my reality. Okay. Last topic is integrity. And what does integrity have to do with trial plots or whatever? There's a couple of dimensions to it. It's a big deal for me. Partly it's a big deal because there's scar tissue for me around this. And so especially when you're talking to people that have ideas that aren't mainstream yet, that there may be copyright, patent right issues and all that sort of stuff. It's really important to understand what the assumptions are on your part and their part on who owns what, and who gets to say what, and who gets to expose what to what. I had a little plot, love to show you the pictures, had a little plot that I got in half-mile rows, an extra 75 bushels to the acre of field, that's field average. And I was showing it to the growers, well, I hardly wait to talk to Lawrence about this. He said, well, you can't tell anybody. Well, wait a minute. Well, he said, I gotta compete with my neighbors. You know, you can't be telling people about what we're doing here. Oh, okay, well, that's kind of interesting. And I've had a couple of instances of that, and it's painful because you go into these deals with the idea that it's an interesting experiment and all that. But if it gets real, it can get dicey. Excuse me. I do have scar tissue and receipts from lawyers on that. Confidentiality is kind of in that same category. Expectations and compensation. If you plant a bit of crop and it fails miserably, are they going to compensate you for the crop that failed? Well, I don't know. We didn't talk about that. We thought you were going to get twice as much more. The fact that you didn't get any, oh, well, that's a problem. It's just an experiment. It's important to understand that up front. Who owns the success and who owns the failure and all that. Another motivation for keeping it small if it's a big change. Big change, small plot. Small change, big plot. Okay, very important. Outreach, requirements, and limitations. So a lot of really good work is funded by grants. USDA grants, I've been blessed with several SARE grants. They love outreach. That's a requirement. They love social media. But other people may not. They may not be ready to share what you're doing. They may not be ready to share results. So that's part of their value add. That's where they're getting investment money and all that sort of stuff. So it's really important to understand that. I want to talk just a little bit about social media. Go to the next slide. I love the people at No-Till Conference and all of that, but they've literally pissed me off a few times. I had a podcast that I was in one time, and I talked about the triple bottom line. You all have a triple bottom line. You want to be sustainably profitable every year. You want to leave the soil in better shape than you got it, and you got to produce something to feed the world. That's your triple bottom line. So okay, we had that little conversation, nice little podcast. So a little email comes out. In today's podcast, Bob Recker is going to tell you how to triple your bottom line. Oh, wait a minute. And so I right away, hey, you can't do that. Well, then we know that she's not there. Okay, left a couple messages. Okay, well then I'm gonna call your boss if I don't hear from you soon. 5 minutes later, I got a call. Then she's no longer with the company. Her boss is no longer with the company. But what I've learned is the media never retracts. They prepare really. What they did is they attached an addendum to that says information presented here does not represent what will how your profitability will be impacted. What they basically said here is Bob Recker's a lion sack of shit. We're going to provide it for you. And that didn't go down. So then this showed up about a week ago. Where's it say? 50 bushels to the acre, corn yield. Who's against, anybody here against 50 bushels to the acre of corn yield improvement? By strip cropping. Good grief, everybody's going to be strip cropping in a couple of years because there's a 50 bushel advantage, right? So next slide. So it goes in, and this is the author. I don't know the person, and I don't know the farmer. I'm sure Jason Webster, maybe I do, but I'm sure it was all done in good faith and all that. And way down here, small print, well, on the outer edges, it went from 190 to 240. On the outside edges of north-south plots, fine print. But the expectation and all that. So if someone is coming to you with audacious claims that are too good to be true, look for the fine print, because they may have an intern working for them that doesn't have the training, integrity, whatever, to make it right. One more, and then PTI, Precision Technology Farm, the precision planting guys. I respect those guys. They did some really nice stuff. What's wrong with this graphic? Anybody have an opinion? There's two things wrong with this graphic. Two things.
It's not zero. Yep, not zero based.
Not zero base. So if you want to make a little thing look like a big thing, some of the stuff that Alex had back here had little lines, and he was going, hey, this matters, you know? It was little bitty lines from where I was standing, God, oh, it's all the same. This doesn't look like it's all the same, but it is. Okay? There's one other little detail in here that's even more subtle, and that is these are just the outside rows, and then there's a whole bunch of center rows. So if you were to do this graphic right, the blue and the gray would be fairly narrow strips, and the big wide center one that's lower would be wider. So the visual image you get there is that this is a hell of a deal. But if you represent it more accurately, then you make different decisions, go from there. So it's a hot button I have. I believe that if you want to move the world, it takes great data, that is good data, and it takes great imagery. This is great imagery. And this is good data, but it's not properly represented. And then wrap a story around those two that you tell with integrity and passion. If you can get those three together, you can change the world. So, okay, I think that's it. Just a little plug here for Opportunity Space. The space, and this is one of those deals you got to look for the asterisk. You know, what would you do if you could take half of your crop space and do something else with it? And you can. I mean, that's real. But you do need to offset some yield reduction. And I guarantee you, I'm working my tail off to turn the yield reduction to zero. But I haven't got there yet. You saw the pots we had at Parkersburg. We didn't get there yet. And we have reasons, and they kind of sound like excuses, but we haven't got there yet. But we're going to keep trying to do that. Next slide.
Yeah.
We're almost done, folks. Hang in there. Cover crop. This is a really nice lush cover crop. What's interesting about this is half the species that we planted. The other half are dead because we had to kill them, because we had to come in with a sprayer, because our water hemp was getting away from us, because I was too late getting the cover crop in. Not excuses, reasons. But there's really opportunities here for grazing. My ears always perk up as you realize that at dinner, when people say cattle or sheep, then grazing shows up, and wide rows are kind of a no-brainer for anybody that has walking self-propelled manure spreaders. Okay. Just another image from the past. Always celebrate the unexpected outcomes. This is a good friend of mine, and one of my oldest customers. Worked with him in Waterloo for years. He gives me junk ground and we try to do stuff. He wanted turnips planted with my planter. I don't know whether you've ever seen a turnip seed, but I went to the smallest drill in my little drill set, and the turnips blew right through the meter. Okay, and so I, finally got it to sort of work. Precision said, "Don't put that stuff in your speed tubes, or your speed drives. Speed tubes, that's right.
Speed tubes.
That's right, because it clogs it up. I mean, the stuff looks like dust." But he had been planting turnips with a little organ grinder in his field. So I went in, but not planting, broadcasting. I went in, and I'm a firm believer in get the seed in the ground, get some soil around it, and then pray for rain. And he had a lush crop of turnips. We got no corn off this field. Again, it was a unmitigated disaster growing corn, but he generated more revenue off the turnips that were in that field by selling to the local farmers market and a food bank than he ever would have gotten off the corn. So he's happy as a pig in a puddle. I think that is it. So you never know what's going to happen. So know your goal. What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to accomplish with a trial? and then ask the guy or gal that's coming at you with an opportunity, what are they trying to accomplish? And show me your data, and who gets to say what to who, when. I think that's it. One more, we're done, we're done. I hate that none of you have asked questions. I should have started that way. I bet one or two think I'm crazy, or you have some questions. I wonder why, or want to buy my little tractor. Yes, sir.
You said that your legacy so far is White Rose. Is there something next
Yeah,
that you're looking for?
yeah.
And is it?
It's not retirement, we know that.
I just, my dad died of Alzheimer's in '92, and I'm gonna fight it every step of the way. I hope to demonstrate short corn next to tall corn with a big open space in between. So the short corn is really happy because it gets a whole bunch of sunlight because it's next to the cover crop. And the tall corn is really happy because it's next to the short corn. And I don't know, and I really shouldn't be saying that in a way, but I'm like, I'm too old to do all this stuff and keep a secret, so I'm gonna just share it. Yeah, that, if you keep scratching away all of the layers of Bob, ultimately you'll get to small autonomous tractors. I think that, I am recording, I think that.
No, the Zoom's not working. so we're good.
Okay. I can't see the endless power, and complexity is there. But yeah, I really think small equipment and ultimately a farm scale should be based on value, not on thin margins, but that's, I haven't made any money yet in my little deals, so. Great tax write-offs.
I gotta ask a question, Bob. So if you could go back 20 years ago, roughly to when you about started this journey, about the first time we crossed paths about 20 years ago, what would you do differently, or what would you tell the Bob of 20 years ago that you wish you knew then, that you know now?
Stay
And
away
how,
from Lauren.
That is a really hard question.
I wasn't gonna let you buy easy.
My younger brother died this last January of leukemia. He was told he had a few weeks. He got a year. He said one time, if I knew 3 years ago I was going to go this way, I wouldn't have done anything different. I'm not sure. I value the Poor Dirt Farmers Group that Lauren started, and you know, it's gotten quiet. I value all the people that I've run across. Even the ones that think I'm a nut, you know, it's just been fun. I'd have to think about that. I'll get back to you on that. I don't know. I'm glad I don't have land. If I had a rich Aunt Martha that gave me 100 acres, I would want to go try to prove how smart I was. And I'd have, A, I'm not, B, I'd fail. C, I wouldn't, and I have a grand nephew, I've given this advice to, he's a young John Deere engineer. I said, don't buy so much land that you want to farm it, because it'll make you so conservative because you don't want to lose your ass on that farm. And therefore you won't have the open exploring mind that good young engineers have. Does that make sense? So it's a lot of my peer group have farmed for years, and I don't envy any of them. And I know they don't envy me. So it's been fun. Heavy duty question. Others?
I'd say that was a mic drop almost, but. Alex, one question for you, the nitrogen study you guys are doing, do you want to mention anything about that? In
I'd
case
love
we-
to plug it. So yeah, we're working with Iowa State on the Iowa Nitrogen Initiative. And the reason it's a great one to plug is, number one, it's really easy to do, provided you have variable rate technology on your nitrogen application equipment. And number two, it should be super high value to farmers in improving nitrogen rate recommendations across Iowa, Really hoping to improve our progress in the nutrient reduction strategy. So we're working with Dr. Castellano and his project manager is Melissa Miller from Iowa State. And so the Iowa Nitrogen Initiative is 5 rate replicated trials that are put in premier crops and advanced learning blocks. So they're really 5 to 10 acre trials. We take a little bit of yield history, some management data, how you farm, and then we make a prescription, supply, share your data. Hardly know that there's a trial
See, you're
there.
not
So,
retired.
if you're interested, I've got some business cards. I'd love to hand them all out. But yeah, Nitrogen Initiative, super easy to do, prescription based, and it touches a very expensive input that I'm pretty sure everybody in this room uses. So should be relevant.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to touch on that is, we're probably gonna be doing a Sentinel fertigation for a few guys trial. We'll probably try to piggyback that with the Iowa soil, I think. So if you wanna do the Sentinel fertigation, get a hold of me. We'll talk. I gotta find out how many trials we can run on that one. But, we were out at farm today, kind of getting him introduced. I mean, he'll actually have the Yield 360 rain running. And we're gonna tie in with that, do a trial on that one. Then we'll piggyback, we'll do the lighter version, which will basically be for guys that are wide dropping and stuff like that.
And I think, I don't know if I should talk about it, but our autonomous guy across the way there,
Yeah, Dave Krogh, if you've seen him around here.
he's gonna do some on some Iowa State research farms, so kind of see how his technology plays with other things that we're doing.
You had them running this year? How-
They did, so Dave helped us with some seeding rate trials in 2023. So he's gonna do a little bit more this year on planting date where residue's been removed and not removed with his autonomous planter. And then he's gonna be working direct with Melissa on wide dropping autonomously on Iowa State research farms, putting in those 5 rate trials. So.
Any other questions? Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys all for coming. Members, appreciate everything you guys do for us. This night was for you. New prospects, if you're interested, talk to me. It's $250 one-time membership fee and then $250 or $25 a year maintenance fee. And if you sign up for a membership, then you come in and sign up for the farm trials. That is why you guys were picked and invited tonight. You know, we're trying to build out our farmer trial network and start blossoming. Margaret, do you want to say anything about the Ag Launch Trial Network? I mean, we always had our trial network, but I think we're formally bringing them together. So I work hand in hand with Margaret's team. We got Tom, the new guy, and he will actually be doing the data management and stuff like that. And intent is the software, is that officially a go now?
Not official, but
Not
close.
officially, but
But close.
you know, that's some of the things we've learned last year that we really need to up the game. And that's what we're prepared to do, I would say. Like I said, you know, I've been watching the past year trying to figure out what we need to chink in the armor. And data collection is a big thing. You know, if you'd see some of the data we had mined this fall, it was a nightmare. And we just want to start helping these companies on the other side of the wall get the best data they can get, because a lot of us are investors. And that's the other thing with Ag Venture Alliance. If you're a member, you're an investor in all them companies there. So if you do become a member and want to invest more, Joe's a good one to talk to on some of that. He's part of the Countryside Angels. I'm part of the Countryside Angels. Mark's Countryside Angels. I think a few more might be around here, but Carl, I think you're one. But that's where I actually have the opportunity to invest directly in these companies. So if you have the chance to trial these companies and you're happy with them and you see the future with them, you can actually turn around and invest in them and stuff like that. So, but anything else should I add, Margaret, or
Yeah,
you want
I'll just say, Thomas and I are with Ag Launch, which is a partner with Ag Ventures Alliance. And we are working with Lauren in terms of setting up trials, et cetera. What we really love is that we get an Iowa, Minnesota presence in data, and we get Tennessee, southern data or Oregon data. that really help startups like the ones over here. And the data is so critical because, you know, if they don't get that, they lose a year. They lose a year of development in a sense. Every bit of data that we're able to give them or the results help feed into their message with an investor. Like, we reached this milestone, we improved this in the field. Those things are so critical. But what's just as important is you helping them with their value proposition and ease of use or convenience. Like, how can this work in the field? So those two things are incredibly important. I'll give you an example. We had a robotic company, Earthsense, brought their TerraSentia robot, you know, been working in the University of Illinois labs and doing just fine. They brought it out to a cotton field in Tennessee, and that thing flipped over, immediately turtled up and couldn't move. They had to redesign the wheels, right? Same kind of thing. Iowa company doing some great work up here with autonomous stuff, bring it down to Tennessee and that triple digit summer and burned the batteries up like the batteries didn't last. So it's important to have a network that's beyond just, you know, a singular geographical area to help these teams get started. And that's why the partnership is so great.
On the whole ag launch program, the 365 is just neat. I mean, what was it? 6 years ago, I was asked to go to Indiana and do a deal. I didn't know what I was agreeing to do, but it turned out I agreed to be a judge for ag launch. And I will say that's one of the best things I've ever agreed to do without knowing what I was getting into. And, you know, the next day Spencer called me and said, oh, by the way, you got to become a member. So the going joke is it's the first time it ever cost me more to go to an event than I was going to get compensated. So. But as I said, it's been one of the best things I've ever done. You know, getting to work with the farmers in Tennessee, you know, that's why we want to start building out this network, you know, the Zoom calls and stuff like that. Mark and a few other guys have been on them. You know, when you get that knowledge or the opportunity to acquire the knowledge from guys across the country, you don't read about it in a magazine. You don't read about it anywhere else. Your experience is live. And I think Alex Forbosh says it's the best. It's a really cool chance to work with some really smart people. So that's my pitch. I mean, if you guys want to talk to me afterwards about membership or get a hold of me, most of you have my contact and that. And like I said, this thing is for all you guys. And I hope we started something pretty cool. And thank you guys. I think the waiter's supposed to, I tried to get the waiter to come back. But go ahead, Ross.
What's like the year look like for big event, not events, but just itinerary of key events and things going on? What's the sequence?
Well, we just basically finished working with all the new cohort for this year. What have we got? 4 biologicals, technology company, which is Grip. Tracy's running around here. That's, if you guys are interested in that one, I worked out a deal with Tracy where we're actually probably gonna split a membership here. You'll get like five QR codes. You'll be able to take them home, putting them on your equipment. And then you can data log all your equipment. So like when you fill up with fuel, you scan that QR code, you punch in how much fuel you use. And, you know, we're going to have one of them test running in Southern Iowa too. But for the price point, we were working with Tracy trying to figure out something that can reach our size of farmers. So we're going to be a trial group for him. So like I said, that one we're implementing already. By planting here, we're going to try to have all the SOWs done for the ones that we will actually be trialing this spring. And the sad part is I don't think we're really close to knowing exactly which ones we got. I mean, we've got Avoya and a few others.
Right. Avoya is ready. We've got their step of work in hand. So Avoya is ready. That would be in that plant.
Yeah, Wandering Shepherd. I know we're going to try to work with them. I know Carl and Wendy, we kind of got you guys picked for that. If we can work that out, it's going to be it'll be kind of the same type of deal as Grip, where we're going to try to split one and help them really test how far they can reach with their technology. That's a bolus that goes in the cow like a magnet would, but then it's a RFID chip that they can basically track where that cow is. They can even do pregnancy checking and stuff like that. But like the sheep and all that stuff will be available. You know, they'll have a bolus for sheep and stuff like that, small animals. And like I said, it's been Trying to remember, well, we got Gaither, that's a small robotic one, but that'll be more out west. And,
We've got two soil health type companies. One will test your rhizosphere of your soil and determine which biological products will perform best in your soil. And we need volunteers to be a part of that one. It means pulling some soil samples, sending some seed, that kind of thing. So that's one. That's why Doug Toll is here today as one of the owners. The other is Soil Metrics. And Soil Metrics has a really cool solution. They've already loaded, one of our southern farmers loaded their data. Basically what they can always do is confirm that the, maybe the AI kind of version.
basically it turns your soil samples into a virtual reality map, or I think that's the best way to say it. So like you've got your grid sampling, but it'll take it down to under 10 meters or something like that. I mean, it gets it right down. Like the Haney test, even you can take that and it'll simulate that all across the field using AI data and from satellites.
And so the outcome of that could be that if you use that technology in the future, then that could inform decisions throughout the season. And instead of like, we all pull our soil samples, send them in, wait to get that information back. And then, we have one times data, one part of the year, one snapshot in time. So Soil Metrics is another one that we're looking for partners to participate in.
Yeah, and Rise Bio that you mentioned, Ryan Gibbs was supposed to be here tonight. He's already done theirs.
Okay.
And he got the data back. I told him save that. Well, he couldn't make it tonight, but he'll be on the farmer panel tomorrow if you're at the annual meeting. So, but very interesting results. And pretty cool technology. Sentinel Fertigation's another one that we'll have this year.
Right.
I said, I'm sure. We've been through so many companies the last couple months here. I told her this is the first time that I sat in on the whole process that them companies go through. And it's like watching sausage get made. I think that's the way I would describe it. It's one thing to judge these companies all the way up through, but then see the mentoring and all that stuff that these companies go through to help them. And that's the whole ag launch process. And I mean, the success ratio of the ag launch companies and that has been pretty neat to watch. So any other questions or comments or? I tried to get the waiter to come, but I'll check on that.
Thank you.